When a conflict begins, the immediate focus is usually the battlefield: missiles, airstrikes, naval deployments, etc. But another battlefield often appears at the same time inside governments that did not start the war and yet must absorb its consequences. Right now, that battlefield is Europe. The conflict with Iran, triggered by the February strikes that killed Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, is already imposing direct pressure on the European Union: energy pressure, security pressure, political pressure. Individually, each of these challenges might be manageable. Together, they form something more difficult: a strategic squeeze. The most immediate pressure is energy. About one-fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas (LNG) shipments move through the Strait of Hormuz. When Iranian forces began threatening commercial shipping there, global markets reacted immediately. Oil prices moved above $100 again. European natural gas prices rose much sharply. For Europe, energy volatility is not a distant problem. It translates quickly into economic stress. Higher fuel costs feed inflation. Higher inflation reduces household purchasing power. Industry, especially chemicals, metal, and manufacturing, face rising input costs. The result is slower economic growth. Europe entered 2026 expecting modest expansion, roughly about 1%. Energy disruption can erase that margin very, very quickly. The second pressure is security. For the first time in the conflict, military activity has already touched European territory. Iranian drones and missiles targeted the British Air Force base in Cyprus. That matters for a simple reason. Cyprus is a member of the European Union, but it is not a part of NATO, which means the familiar collective defense framework does not automatically apply. European states, therefore, responded individually. France deployed its naval assets. Greece and Italy increased air defense coverage. Spain and the Netherlands reinforced regional patrols. And all of these, if you look at them closely, are defensive actions. But they also show how quickly a regional war can expand operational demands on the European militaries. The third pressure is political cohesion. European governments do not view this conflict the same way. In France, President Macron criticized the initial strikes while still deploying forces defensively. In Germany, leaders have been more supportive of the American strategic objectives. In Spain, tensions emerged after restrictions on US aircraft operations. Meanwhile, several Eastern European states worry less about Iran itself and more about Russia exploiting the distraction. Different geography produces different priorities, and those differences complicate a unified response. All of this creates a narrow operating space for Europe. The European Union relies heavily on the United States for security cooperation, intelligence, and military capabilities. At the same time, Europe is directly exposed to the economic consequences of instability in the Middle East. That combination produces a difficult balance. Support the United States enough to maintain cohesion, but avoid deep military entanglement in a conflict that Europe did not initiate. All of these pressures, energy, security, politics, feed into a deeper structural issue. The European Union has spent the past decade discussing something called strategic autonomy, the idea that Europe should eventually be able to act independently in a global crisis. But autonomy requires three things: military capability, political unity, and decision speed. Right now, Europe has partial versions of all three, but not enough of any one. So when a major conflict erupts, especially one initiated by allies, Europe finds itself in a narrow corridor. too dependent on the United States to ignore it, too exposed to the Middle East to stay neutral, and too divided internally to shape the outcome. This is what the strategists sometimes call a great power squeeze. So what happens next? Well, 3 developments will determine how serious this crisis becomes for Europe. First, the stability of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Second, whether further strikes target Europe facilities or personnel or not. And third, the duration of the conflict itself. If energy flows stabilize and attacks remain limited, the shock may remain manageable. If disruption spreads, Europe could face a prolonged combination of economic and security strain. Either way, the war is already reshaping Europe's strategic environment. And the coming weeks will show whether the European Union can maintain cohesion while responding to a crisis unfolding just beyond its southern flank. This has been a dispatch. I'm sure, just like me, you have friends who hate politics but still love the headlines behind the headlines. Share this dispatch with them and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.